Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are watching Prime Life. Now, up next, we have an amazing conversation with Dr. Henk Boshoff, who is the commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission, who will be discussing the significance of World Toilet Day on November the 19th. Now, he'll also be highlighting the importance of sanitation, emphasizing the need to address inadequate toilet facilities and to promote equitable access to proper hygiene for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Henk, and welcome to Prime Life.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, World Toilet Day may seem like a very, unusual observance. Now, but why is it so crucial to draw attention to this issue?
Well, I think the purpose of World Toilet Day is to galvanize awareness of the centrality of dignified sanitation. And if one just takes the, the South African example, many of our communities still use the bucket toilet system. Pit latrines are still prevalent in South Africa. And as the South African Human Rights Commission, we also felt that it was important to emphasize the importance of World Toilet Day because each and every person is entitled to a toilet.
Most definitely. And how does highlighting sanitation on this day contribute to global efforts in improving health, dignity, and human rights?
Well, the day reminds us that access to safe and dignified sanitation is central to human life, and safe sanitation is recognized as an essential component for human life. Yet, in South Africa and worldwide, it we the world is significantly off track when it comes to to achieving sustainable or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 6. And it's a challenge that we also need to address in South Africa.
Most definitely. And why do you think in South Africa, we have these main sanitation challenges? And how does this also impact human rights?
Well, over the last decades, for a few decades, and specifically over the last 2 years or so, the South African Human Rights Commission has done a lot of investigations. And through our investigations, we have noted that access to safe, hygienic, and adequate sanitation remains a significant challenge in the country. And in a recent investigative report, in fact, we released that report today in Mahikeng, the Northwest Service Delivery Report. We found that residents in several municipalities in the Northwest Province are subjected to utilizing toilets that do not allow them to live a life of dignity due to the lack of basic sanitation. And what we also recently released the 2025 Schools Readiness Monitoring Report. And that report showed that poor sanitation or pit latrines is part of the top 5 systemic challenges reported in schools nationally, which to us is obviously a serious concern. It affects the dignity of our children.
Most definitely. And also, like, how can, in terms of a way forward, now that we know the issues that we face as a country, how can we ensure equitable access to clean toilets, and especially when it comes to rural and unprivileged areas? Where do we begin?
I think we need to find solutions, and we need to find solutions by moving away from policy rhetoric to policy implementation in addressing sanitation woes in the country. There's too much talk and not enough implementation. And toilet, according to us, a toilet is an essential space in our lives, and it must be safe. It must be addressed. And by implementation, we think that it is the first step in addressing this specific challenge.
And what initiative is the SAHRC taking to improve sanitation and also raise awareness about its importance?
Well, we are doing everything possible to ensure access to sanitation, and we continue to conduct investigations to advocate and monitor access to sanitation. We've released so many reports recently, inquiry reports, investigative reports, and through our investigations, through our monitoring activities, um, there's a definite attempt by the South African Human Rights Commission to drive awareness for this specific challenge.
Mm. And also, I want us to just touch a bit more on, the effects of poor sanitation and how this can affect the public's health, especially also within the education sector and also when we speak about gender equality.
It's a very relevant question, and a question that affects many women and girl children in South Africa. Poor sanitation has a gendered aspect, as adolescent girl learners are forced to miss school every month due to the absence of safe, hygienic, and dignified sanitation facilities at schools. And women and girl children are acutely affected by the lack of safe, hygienic, adequate sanitation, and they are experiencing heightened health and security risks in the absence of safe sanitation. A serious challenge, a relevant question.
Mm. Most definitely. And let's talk about, what communities or what role can individuals and communities play in advocating for better sanitation in infrastructure.
When we have these engagements with communities, and they all also ask us, but what more can we do? We always tell people, continue to lodge your complaints with the South African Human Rights Commission.
Mm. Mm.
Continue to demand accountability from government in the provision of access to sanitation.
Mm.
We, as the Commission, can only do so much, but by reporting the complaint to us, we will at least investigate the complaint and also bring it to the attention of the relevant organ of state. But people also need to demand accountability from government, because we, as the Human Rights Commission, we are not the implementers. We're an oversight body. We make government aware of the challenges. We make recommendations, but people also need to demand accountability from government.
Mm. And speaking about people demanding more from government also, let's talk about policymakers and how we can make sure that they prioritize sanitations in their agendas, and also there is sufficient resources that are allocated within, this sector.
Well, you are correct. They must budget accordingly, and they must ensure that no resources are spared. And I want to emphasize that the wastage, the that we have seen in local government, the maladministration, um, that must stop as a matter of urgency, because sufficient funds are available. But through our investigations, we've seen so much wastage, so much financial mismanagement, and that needs to be addressed. And then also municipalities need to ensure that their IDPs, their integrated development plans, reflect sanitation as a priority.
Most definitely. And also, I want us to talk about, the long-term consequences of neglecting sanitation and how we can, prevent these outcomes.
Well, again, sanitation is a matter of dignity, and therefore it cannot be neglected. It's not supposed to be neglected, but unfortunately, we have seen in South Africa that it is neglected. And the lack of sanitation affects human dignity. It has a detrimental impact upon women and girl children in particular. It's time for government to address this challenge. But it's also important for Chapter 9 institutions, constitutional bodies, government at national, provincial, and local government level, civil society, NGOs, etc., everyone to uh, need needs to take hands in ensuring that we address the sanitation challenges in South Africa.
Mm. And also, I want us to, just talk about the fact that, as South Africans, we're seeing that this is happening, and throughout, there's so many communities that are still struggling with sanitation and, proper toilets. Is this something that you see being resolved soon, or is this something that, there's still a room of improvement for? Do we see government and policymakers actually moving towards the direction of making sure that every single person has a right, or rather access to proper sanitation?
Well, we've seen some progress since the dawn of democracy. The first 10 years or so, the first 15 years of democracy, there was huge improvement with regards to municipal infrastructure in South Africa. But over the last decade or so, even more, last 15 years or so, we have seen that not, well, funds were made available to provide services to the communities. Unfortunately, we've seen too much corruption, too much uh, financial mismanagement, too much wastage of financial resources. And although, from the side of the Human Rights Commission, we make government aware. This week, I'm in the Northwest Province. I was driving in the Northwest Province, and the conditions that people live under is just unbelievable. You just get the impression that the political office bearers in the Northwest Province simply don't care. The caring culture does not exist in this province anymore, and it is something that government urgently needs to address.
Mm. Most definitely. And should, people start moving, or rather the government start moving to making sure that, everybody has access to sanitation? Or in your
Mm.
vision, how does a country look like? What do you hope to see within the next 10 years?
Everyone, well, the next 5 to 10 years will in South Africa not be possible, but definitely in the future, each and every person in the country needs to have access to a toilet, not to a bucket or to a pit needs to have access to a toilet.
Mm.
But moreover, it's very important that your municipal infrastructure should be maintained.
Mm.
We see too much sewage spillages in all our towns in the country. There is not one town in South Africa that is not experiencing sewage spillages, huge amounts of sewage spillages. Infrastructure needs to be maintained. Municipalities need to appoint skilled staff, and budgets need to be allocated correctly to address service delivery and not for the benefit of political office bearers and municipal staff members.
Most definitely. I mean, Dr. Henk, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing insight, and, just for educating us on this very crucial topic, and just for commemorating this very important day, which is World Toilet Day, that's going to be taking place on the 19th of November, which is tomorrow. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Viewers at home, this was a fantastic interview that I just had with Dr. Henk Boshoff, and he is the commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission, and we were just discussing the significance of World Toilet Day that we will be, commemorating, which is tomorrow on Wednesday, and we were just talking about, the impact that it has on education, gender equality, also just as a society, the importance of sanitation, making sure that everybody's health is prioritized, because you can imagine if there is no sanitation and the systems in which people people use, to really for toilets, like doctor has mentioned, some people are still using buckets, and the type of toilets that are also being used, also due to the cause of not having access to clean water or just water in general, and how that can affect one's health. And how unfair it is also that we live in a country whereby everybody's just like on the far end of the spectrum, where people are living lavishly on one side and they have access to the basic human needs, but on the other end you still find people that are struggling to actually have access to in general needs that every single South African is supposed to be having as access to. And just how we as activists or people that are just very touched on this important matter can continue to spread awareness, and how policymakers can also try to push the government to release the budget, most importantly, and spend it accordingly on the South African citizens' needs. But on that note, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We shall see you after this.